Hello, welcome to Your Museum Moment. My name is Ellie Gettinger. I'm the Education Director at Jewish Museum Milwaukee, and I'm delighted to be with you on this Tuesday. Today, we are turning over a new leaf as we think about what's coming up on the calendar. We've just finished summer, and we're now into the school year. And on September 16th, there is a commemoration on the Wisconsin school calendar. It's a commemoration of a lady whose name is Mildred Fish Harnack. And so your son says, okay, Mildred Fish Harnack, she has a commemoration day on the Wisconsin, the DPI calendar, the Department of Public Instruction calendar. Why? What would that be? And in the next two segments, both today and Thursday, we're going to explore her story and why there is a day associated with her, and hopefully give some of you an idea of things to do with that day. So the day in question is September 16th. September 16th is officially Mildred Fish Harnack Day, and it's actually the day she was born. She was born on September 16th, 1901. And Mildred Fish, as she was then known, was born to a family that kind of had prospects that kept getting diminished. Her father was a bit of an itinerant, employee. He had he never quite could hold down a job. I believe he was a bit of a drunkard. They kept moving from house to house, and yet they lived in what was then the fanciest neighborhood in Milwaukee. They were in the area around State Street, where just west of Marquette, where all of the beer barons were. And she went to West Division High School. So, in looking at Mildred's life, it was this sense of being a have-not in a land of haves, that she was in the universe of people who was constantly questioning, where am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to do? How do I make ends meet in this? And her mother she had a number of siblings, and her mother was working hard. But one thing was clear for Mrs. Fish is that her children needed to be educated, and that included her daughters. So Mildred went to high school. She went to West Division High School, which is now Milwaukee High School of the Arts. This is her high school image. And she was a writer for the paper. She was a poet. She was engaged in student life. Her best friend at school was a Jewish girl named Grace Karlsruhe. And we don't really know much about this friendship, but I do have this sense that her later action, which we'll talk about more on Thursday, comes down to this point of maybe having this kind of close connection with someone who is Jewish increased her sense, again, of understanding what it's like to be outside, of being the other, of being, engaged in a different way. So Mildred, and actually this is a comment from a book about Mildred called Resisting Hitler, Mildred Harnack and the Red Orchestra, which gives you a little bit of a spoiler for what our Thursday session is about. But the sense of Mildred as a resistor, I think we have to really get a sense of her life in Milwaukee first. I love this because there's so many places that her biographer, Shireen Blair Brysack, writes about in this. She says, seasons were marked by the flooding of the yard for skating, or bobsled rides down Booth Street Hill in winter, swimming in the Milwaukee River, can you guys imagine, or outings in Mitchell Park rowboat boats in the summer. On summer vacation visits to relatives on farms, Mildred gathered sweet corn in bushel baskets and watched while her aunt churned butter or her uncle played with kittens on the back stoop. Fall was escorted in by the mounted police who led the Labor Day parade, an event universally attended in this trained Union citadel. Real treats were going by Schuster's department stores for school supplies and birthday presents, taking nickel elephant rides on Countess Heine at the Milwaukee Zoo, and lining up for the annual automobile parade and setting off firecrackers on the 4th of July. So her life was really marked by all of these different aspects of Milwaukee life, and she was pretty engaged in the kind of civic culture and community culture. After she graduated from West Division, she enrolled in college. She went to University of Wisconsin-Madison, which again, for a person who is not financially super engaged, whose mother is working significant amount of hours, whose father is gone, it's an impressive achievement for a girl in the early 19-teens, in the mid-19-teens, to go to college and to enroll and to think about what she wants to do as a profession, which is clearly very important to her. While she's there, this is her transcript. And this is her. She studies English and literature, and she writes for the Literary Society, and she's engaged in a lot of different salon type activities. And one of the things that I find fascinating about Madison in the early part of the 20th century is how Madison is central to what Wisconsin is doing as a broader state, that there isn't this sense of divide between the ivory tower and the state capitol, that the two pieces, the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the State House, are working together to solve some of the major fundamental issues that are going on in our state and our country. And in doing this, she actually meets a student who's pretty engaged with a lot of the economic activities. His name is Mildred Harnack, and he's a German student who came to Wisconsin to study with John Commons. Now, Commons is a professor of economics, and we talked about him a little at our Labor Day session, but he's someone who sees that this idea of the Wisconsin idea, the idea that the university and the state are going to be enmeshed to kind of come up with best possible practices. This is what he's all about. This is what he's here to research. He's here to see how academia and government can work together in harmony, and he wants to bring that back home. It's an interesting thing to be a German student in an American university right after the end of World War I. This can't be an entirely comfortable place, but on the flip side, he becomes part of this kind of sense of salon and culture. And actually, it's interesting when he writes back to his mother, he says, it's amazing. She doesn't speak a word of German, and my English isn't very good, but it was love at first sight. It's actually love at second sight. And their connection is one of intellectual ideas. It's certainly one of passion and love. And I think you can see it in this picture, just how united they are on all planes. And this really is one of the identifying factors of their relationship. Again, this is John Commons. And Harnack was an economics student. And so they met in one of the many salons that is going on around these kinds of cultural ideas. And then he happened to come into a class where she was TAing, or she was kind of giving a presentation. She was in the front, and it was love at second sight. Arvid writes to her mother, to his mother. Once again, Arvid writes to Mildred's mother to ask for her hand in marriage, and they get married months after they meet. And he says, I can't find the words to tell you how happy I am to have met Mildred. The second time I saw her here, I knew for certain we belonged together, and I could bring out the best in each other. Mildred is so fine and so tender to the very core of her being that I cannot think of anything but good when I am with her. I also think that she will fit into my family well because she has a likeness to one of my sisters and to my deceased father. That is both a physical likeness and also an intellectual likeness. Harnack comes from this family of intellectual rock stars in Germany. They had been academics for generations, many PhDs, many people at the kind of premier hair doctor kind of realm in Germany. And the Harnack family is kind of at the center of that intellectual pursuit. And so there's this real sense in joining this family that she is marrying not just the gentleman, but that whole sense of their academic life and who they are within the community. It's a pretty cool story in general. And it also shows a tremendous amount of partnership for a marriage in the late teens, early 20s of the 20th century. I'm always amazed by this. After they finish at Madison, there isn't this immediate sense that Mildred can go to Germany. And in fact, she goes to Baltimore and teaches at Goucher College for a year or so before she can go to Germany. She moves to Germany in 1931. And this is where all of your warning signs in your head start going off, where you're like, why are the Harnacks going back to Germany? But if you think about what they're in 1931, and as people who are considering what they can do to change the world, they think they're going to change the way Germany runs. They think they're going to be part of putting back this country back together. So she moves to Germany in 1931 and becomes part of the process of living there. In our next session on Thursday, we'll talk about what life in Germany was like for Mildred and Arvid and how they became engaged in what becomes known as the Red Orchestra. So thanks for joining me for this museum moment. So much of this information was gathered for an exhibit we did several years ago called Wisconsin's Nazi Resistance, Mildred Fish Harnack. And I always love sharing her story. I hope that more people know about her story. And I encourage you, if you're interested in learning more, there are fabulous books, including Shireen Blair Brysax, which I quoted. I believe she's in a newer fiction book called Resistance Women. And then she also plays a role in the better known book, The Devil in the Devil's Garden. And this one is by the guy who wrote Devil in the White City. So I'll get you better quotes, better things for that on Thursday. But know that this is just the beginning of our exploration on Mildred Fish Harnack. Thanks for sharing this moment with me, and I'll see you on Thursday.